Welcome back to the late night review. And tonight, I thought I would do a documentary. I've done a couple documentaries before on the channel, two or three, I can't remember, about Bruce Lee. And I figured I would do another documentary, but this one here is about Attila the Hun. And this is a documentary that I watched over and over again when I was a teenager. It was on biography, A&E's biography, and it was about Attila the Hun. It's called Attila the Hun, the Scourge of God, and it's one of the best documentaries, period, that I've ever seen. I really like it a lot. I've seen it over and over again as a kid, and it's probably my very favorite Attila the Hun documentary that I've ever seen, period. I like the music. I like the way it's done. I like the way it's presented. I like the atmosphere. I like the way they did it. I really like the way they did it. I think it's probably one of the best and most well done documentaries that I've ever seen. This is from the 90s. Attila the Hun, the Scourge of God, and they called him the Scourge of God because that's why the reason they called the documentary that by that title is because back then he was called the Scourge of God. There was a lot of people in the church, in the Roman church, that thought that Attila the Hun was God's punishment against Rome for the decadence and corruption of Rome. And so that's why they call this documentary Attila the Hun, the Scourge of God. You can look it up on YouTube. I think it's still available to watch for free. It's awesome. It's one of the best documentaries that I've ever seen. And it's definitely my favorite on Attila the Hun. And they did so many good ones that I'd seen. A&E biography on A&E. And this one, it starts out at the beginning in the 450s AD, 452 AD, not too long before Attila the Hun's death. And then it goes and talks about his life, the beginning of his life, the middle, the end, and it kind of jumps around a little bit, but it gives you his birth, his middle life, and then his later life. But at the beginning, it does talk about what he was doing not too long before he died, and it goes back and forth a little bit. But I like the art. The people that they interview, they seem to know what they're talking about. They interview historians, and they do a really good job. I think it's, like I said, it's one of the best put together documentaries that I've ever seen. I enjoyed it. I used to watch it over and over again, rewind it over and over again. As a kid, I've always liked documentaries about history, but it depends on the subject. It depends on what kind of history they're talking about. I've always been fascinated with like ancient warriors and the Huns, the Mongolians, the Vikings, the Romans, and all that stuff. I've always been fascinated by it. The Huns, originally, the Hunnic people, I believe they came from like the Mongolian area, the Kazakhstan area. Scholars still debate exactly where the Huns came from, but they had a lot of Asian ancestry, East Asian ancestry, probably Mongolian. There's a lot of speculation, but they started out in the East and they migrated they're a nomadic people. The Huns were a nomadic people and awesome warriors. If you see this documentary, if you've never seen a documentary about the Huns, this is probably the one to watch because it's Attila the Hun, the ultimate Hun, and they were practically undefeated in battle under his leadership. But the Huns, as they migrated west towards Europe, they started mixing with the local peoples there, and they started out mostly as an Asian nomadic group coming from Asia and migrating into Europe. They started to mix with Europeans. The Huns started to become more European as the years went on and as they moved further west and into Europe. And it's fascinating. They go into that in this documentary to a degree. They talk about anyone could be a Hun. no matter your ethnicity, you could be a Hun as long as you accepted Hunnic leadership. And I believe the aristocracy of the Hunnic people were mostly Asian. And as you went down the classes, then there was more European blood as they started to mix with the local peoples, like I was saying. It's a fascinating documentary. And in fact, Rome, at the time that they were fighting the Huns, like very few Roman soldiers were Italians anymore. When Rome first started out, the majority was Italian, but as they got into like the 400s, 500s, they were hiring barbarians, they were working with mercenaries. The ethnicity changed because Rome was such a big empire. Most soldiers were not Italian anymore like they were in the early years. And this it's just fascinating. The different battles talks about the corruption of Rome and Attila. They exchange. They used to do something. It's an ancient practice. They would exchange hostages so one could learn about the other's culture. And Aetius and Attila the Hun, they were friends. They became friends. Attila went to live in Rome. Aetius went to live with the Huns, and they both learned about each other's cultures, military tactics, and the peoples. And also, Attila the Hun learned about Rome, and he started to hate it. He looked at the corruption and the decadence, and he made himself a vow one day he'll return to Rome, but not as a hostage, but as a conqueror. And it goes into that in this documentary. It's just fascinating. This is probably my favorite documentary, might be my favorite documentary that I've ever seen about an ancient people, ancient warrior class, warrior group of people. It's just fascinating. I know it's my favorite Attila the Hun documentary. I've seen Julius Caesar documentaries, Alexander the Great documentaries. This one might be my favorite. I'm not sure. Maybe my favorite documentary of all time, or at least it's up there. I've seen documentaries, about World War II, about Patton, about Stalin, about multiple people, and this is right up there. It might even be my favorite documentary that I've ever seen. And when I say favorite documentary, I'm primarily talking about uh, documentaries about generals or conquerors or figures that led nations, dictators, leaders. This is really one of my favorites. It's definitely up there. I don't know if it is my favorite. Definitely my favorite about the Huns. Fascinating. I think if you haven't seen this before, you're in for a major treat. It goes in depth. It talks about why the Huns and the Romans started fighting. It talks about how the Huns, they were absolutely fierce. If you went to battle with them, look out, because they defeated pretty much everybody they ran into, although anyone could join them too, just as long as you accepted their leadership. It talks about that. They interview different historians. They interview different people who have studied the topic, not just history, but about the Huns. And it's fascinating, and you learn lessons. And this documentary, it leaves you not empty like some movies, but it leaves you kind of filled because you've learned something. But there's movies too that leave you that way as well, especially if it's about historical figures, or maybe it's a movie that inspires you to work out, like a lot of movies that I've talked about on this channel before. I figure I'd do another documentary tonight. I've done documentaries on Bruce Lee. I believe it's only on Bruce Lee, if I remember right. I might have done another documentary on someone else. I have to go back and check all my videos, but I think it's just been about Bruce Lee. I thought about doing one about Julius Caesar. They had a great documentary on Julius Caesar on A&E's biography that I watched over and over again in the 90s. This is another one of those. They used to have a series of biographies on A&E, the channel A&E. And this is one of them. They had Alexander the Great. And I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do first, but I picked this one because it's probably my favorite. This one I have to think about that, but it's probably my favorite. Attila, the Scourge of God. Attila the Hun, the Scourge of God. You could probably find it for free on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's one of the best. I think it's pretty historically accurate. I'm not a historian, but according to everything that I've seen, it seems pretty darn accurate. And I think you would enjoy it if you're a person who likes documentaries, especially about historical figures and conquerors, leaders, or dictators. This is one of the best. And I hope you like it. I hope you watch it. This has been the Late Night Review. Please like and subscribe and share this video. Hype it up and pump it up so other people can see this type of content. Hit the thumbs up button. I'd really appreciate it. It helps the channel. And thanks, and have a good night, everybody.